There is an old man on a small island in the Aegean Sea. The island is called Patmos. It is volcanic, black-rocked, barely 8 miles across. The Roman Empire uses it as a dumping ground for people they consider dangerous but do not want to execute, people whose death might cause more trouble than their exile. This old man has been here long enough to know the smell of the sea in every season. His name is John. He is the last one left. Every other man who walked with Jesus, every fisherman, every tax collector, every wide-eyed young disciple is dead. Most of them were killed for what they said. John has outlived all of them, and it has not been gentle. He is walking on the Lord's Day, a Sunday, when he hears it, a voice, and he knows it. He has heard that voice calm a storm from the bow of a wooden boat. He has heard it call a dead man out of a sealed tomb. He has heard it quiet over bread and wine in a low-lit upper room, saying things none of them fully understood until later. He has heard it cry, actually cry with real tears outside the grave of his friend. He knows every register of it. And this is not that. He falls on his face. He knew that voice, and it unmade him. We will come back to that island. We will come back to that old man, and to what he heard, and to why it shook him the way it did, even after everything he had already seen. But to understand why John fell on his face, you have to understand something that most people skip right past when they read the Gospels. Jesus of Nazareth, the carpenter, the teacher, the man who got tired and sat down by wells and ate fish on beaches, spoke repeatedly and specifically about a life he lived before this one. Not once, not in a moment of high drama that could be explained away. He said it in private conversations. He said it in public debates. He said it in a prayer he prayed the night before he died, when there was no crowd left to impress and no argument left to win. He said it to fishermen and theologians and hostile religious authorities who understood exactly what he meant, which is why some of them picked up stones. This is not a theology lecture. This is not a debate about ancient creeds. This is not an academic question that only matters to seminary professors. This is a series of moments, real moments, witnessed moments, written down moments, where the man from Nazareth pulled back a curtain and showed the people around him something that should have been impossible for any human being to say. He remembered before, and he wanted them to know it. So, here is the question we are going to answer today. Every time Jesus spoke about another life before this one, what did he say? Who was he talking to? And what does it mean that he kept saying it, even when it cost him everything? Stay with me, because the answer starts at night in Jerusalem, with a very smart man who came to ask a question and left with something he could not explain for the rest of his life.
His name is Nicodemus, and you need to understand who he is before you hear what Jesus says to him. Nicodemus is not a skeptic. He is not a Roman soldier with no interest in Jewish theology. He is a Pharisee, one of the most educated religious minds in Jerusalem. He sits on the Sanhedrin, the ruling council of Jewish law. He has spent his entire life reading, memorizing, and debating the Torah. If you needed someone to settle a question about Scripture, Nicodemus is the kind of man you would call. He comes to Jesus at night. John records this detail deliberately. Night in John's Gospel carries weight. It is the time of incomplete understanding, of things not yet fully seen. Nicodemus is not hiding exactly, but he is not ready to be seen either. He opens with a compliment. "Rabbi, we know that you are a teacher who has come from God." He uses the word "we," which means he has been talking about Jesus with other people, Powerful people, people who are not saying these things publicly. Jesus barely lets him finish. He cuts straight through the diplomatic opening and starts talking about being born again, being born of water and spirit, about the wind blowing where it will. And Nicodemus is genuinely confused. This is a man used to understanding things, and Jesus is not making it easy. And then Jesus says something that should have stopped Nicodemus cold. No one has ascended into heaven except the one who descended from heaven, the Son of Man. Read that slowly. Jesus is not saying he has a special connection to heaven. He is not saying he has divine knowledge or prophetic insight. He is claiming something far more specific. He descended. He came from there. Heaven is not his destination. Heaven was his point of departure. Here's what most people miss when they read this verse. Nicodemus was a theologian. He knew his scriptures. He knew about prophets who had visions of heaven. He knew about Enoch, about Elijah. What he had never heard, what no rabbi in Jerusalem had ever said, is a man sitting in front of him in a physical body with dust on his sandals, claiming that he had come down from a place that human beings only ever dreamed of going up to. Jesus reverses the direction. Everyone else in human history, every mystic, every prophet, every visionary, has spoken about the possibility of going up to God. Jesus is the only person who has ever claimed to have come down. Nicodemus does not argue. John does not record a rebuttal. What John records is that Nicodemus eventually becomes the man who brings burial spices to a sealed tomb, 100 pounds of myrrh and aloe, an extravagant act of devotion from a man who could not say certain things in public. Whatever happened in that night conversation, it planted something in him that would not die. Now move forward, maybe a year, maybe 18 months. Jesus is standing by the shore of the Sea of Galilee, and the crowd that is gathered is enormous because word has spread about the loaves and the fish, about bread that appeared from nothing in the hands of 5,000. They are hungry for more. They are hungry for a king who will feed them. What he gives them instead breaks the crowd in half. He tells them he is the bread that came down from heaven. He tells them he has come not to do his own will, but the will of the one who sent him. He uses that word sent. He was somewhere. He was dispatched. He arrived. And then he says something that causes nearly everyone who hears it to turn around and walk away. What if you see the Son of Man ascending to where he was before? Where he was before? Not where he is going, where he was. The verb tense is past. He is describing a prior address, an existence that preceded this body, this hillside, this crowd of people reaching for free bread. John tells us what happens next, and it is one of the saddest verses in the Gospels. From that time, many of his disciples turned back and no longer walked with him. Not his enemies, his disciples, people who had been following him for months, people who had seen the miracles up close. They walk away, not because they think he is lying, but because what he is claiming is too much, too big, too strange. Jesus watches them go. He turns to the 12 men still standing there and asks, with what sounds like genuine pain in the question, "Do you also wish to go away?" He does not chase the crowd. He does not soften what he said. He lets the pre-existence claim stand, even as it empties the hillside, because he did not say it to be impressive. He said it because it was true, and he was not in the business of making truth more comfortable than it actually was. Peter, impulsive, calloused-handed, not nearly as articulate as Nicodemus, says the only thing he can say, "Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life." He doesn't understand yet, but he knows that walking away is not an option. Neither, it turns out, is it for us.
Let's pause here for a moment. We have seen two conversations, one with a theologian in the dark and one with a crowd on a hillside. And in both of them, Jesus says something no human teacher has ever said. He doesn't claim to know about heaven. He claims to have come from there. He uses directional language, descent language. He speaks about where he was before, the way you talk about a place you lived and left. And he says it even when it costs him an audience. If this is landing differently than you expected, if you've read the Gospels before and somehow these moments didn't quite register like this, you're not alone. We read them fast. We read past them. We assume they're poetic. They are not poetic. And there is more. What comes next changes the stakes entirely. If this video is showing you something you haven't seen before in the Gospels, would you consider subscribing? This channel exists for moments exactly like this, when familiar words suddenly mean something more than you thought. Hit subscribe and tell me in the comments which statement of Jesus about before has surprised you most so far. Because we are not done, not even close. It is the Feast of Tabernacles in Jerusalem. The city is full. This festival, Sukkot in Hebrew, commemorates the 40 years Israel spent in the wilderness, living in temporary shelters, completely dependent on God for food and water. It is a festival of memory, of origin stories, of who Israel is and where Israel came from. Jesus is teaching in the temple, specifically in the treasury, the section of the temple courts near where the large collection chests stood. It is a public space. People walk through it, and the conversation happening there on this particular day will escalate faster than almost any other recorded in the Gospels. The Pharisees are pressing him, challenging his testimony, demanding to know who he thinks he is, and they make their move. They invoke Abraham. Abraham, 2,000 years before this conversation, the father of the entire Jewish nation, the man to whom God made the covenant, the promise, the land, the descendants as numerous as stars. In the religious imagination of every person in that temple court, Abraham is the ceiling. Abraham is the ultimate authority. Abraham is as far back as history goes. Pay attention to this. Jesus says, "Your father Abraham rejoiced to see my day. He saw it and was glad." The Pharisees hear this and almost laugh. "You're not even 50 years old," they say, "and you've seen Abraham?" He hasn't finished. "Truly, truly, I say to you, before Abraham was, I am." Two words. In Greek, ego eimi. Now this matters. The Greek phrase ego eimi is the exact phrase used in the Greek translation of the Old Testament to translate the divine name God gave to Moses at the burning bush. When Moses asked God his name, God said, "Tell them, I am has sent you." Ego eimi. Jesus does not say, "Before Abraham was, I was." He does not use past tense. He says, "I am," present tense, inside a past tense statement. He collapses time. He places himself outside of it. He is not saying he existed before Abraham the way a very old man might have. He is saying that his existence operates on a different axis than Abraham's entirely. The Pharisees understand exactly what he has said. They pick up stones. In Jewish law, the penalty for blasphemy was death by stoning. These are not men having a theological disagreement. These are men who have heard a human being claim the divine name in the temple, and they are responding with the full weight of what they believe the law requires. They are not overreacting. They understood him exactly. The question is not whether they heard him correctly. The question is whether they were wrong about what he was. Now move to an upper room. It is late at night, Passover. The disciples have finished eating. Judas has already left. The world outside is getting darker, and Jesus begins to pray. John chapter 17. This is called the high priestly prayer, and it is the longest recorded prayer of Jesus in all four Gospels. It is not a performance. There is no crowd to impress. It is Jesus alone with his Father, and with 11 confused, frightened men sitting in the room. He prays for the disciples. He prays for future believers, and then he says this: "And now, Father, glorify me in your own presence with the glory that I had with you before the world existed." Had, past tense, before the world existed. And this is where it gets remarkable. He is not asking for something new. He is asking for something back. He is describing a glory that was his, genuinely his, before matter existed, before time existed, before the first atom of the universe was spoken into being, and he is asking the Father to restore it. This is not a man praying to become divine. This is a divine person asking to be fully revealed again after a season of deliberate concealment. And then, seconds later in the same prayer, he says, "Father, you loved me before the foundation of the world." Before the foundation of the world. The love between the Father and the Son, the love Jesus is appealing to in this prayer, predates creation. It did not begin when Mary said yes to the angel. It did not begin at the Jordan River when the voice from heaven said, "This is my beloved Son." It was already ancient before the first star burned. Augustine of Hippo spent more than a decade wrestling with how to explain this. He finally concluded that eternity is not a very long time. It is a different kind of existence than time entirely. The Son inhabiting it before the Incarnation is not like a man who lived for thousands of years before being born. The categories simply do not translate. What Jesus describes in this prayer is a relationship, a love that exists outside of time's borders. The disciples sitting in that room cannot hold all of that, but something shifts. Just before the prayer, Jesus says it plainly enough that they finally speak aloud, "I came from the Father and have come into the world, and now I am leaving the world and going to the Father." A round trip, stated with the calm of someone reading a travel itinerary. The disciples look at each other, and they say, with what sounds almost as a relief, "Now we know that you came from God." Jesus looks at them, and he asks something that is either tender or a little devastating, depending on how you hear it. Do you finally believe? 3 years. 3 years of walking together, miracles, arguments, boat rides, questions in the dark, moments of stunning clarity followed by complete confusion, and "do you finally believe?" is what comes out. Not triumph, not frustration, something more like the patient love of someone who has been waiting across a very long distance for the people he loves to catch up. Now, back to the island. John is an old man. He has outlived every other member of the 12. He has watched Peter be crucified. He has watched James be beheaded. He has watched the church he helped build be scattered across the known world. He has been exiled to Patmos, this black volcanic rock in the Aegean, by the Emperor Domitian, who finds him too dangerous to kill and too stubborn to silence. He is probably in his 90s. His hands are old fishermen's hands, stiffened by age and cold. He has been thinking about Jesus for 60 years. He knows the teachings. He wrote them down. He has the words carried in him the way you carry the voice of someone you loved. He knows the bread of life discourse by heart. He was in the room for the high priestly prayer. He has spent 6 decades telling people about a man he walked with, a man he watched die, a man he saw standing in a garden 3 days after the tomb was sealed. And on this Sunday morning, on this black island, in this cold Aegean wind, he hears something, a voice behind him, like the sound of many waters, like a trumpet, and he knows it. He knows it the way you know the voice of someone you love, but it has opened up into a scale he has never heard before. It is like a man who has only ever seen a candle flame being placed suddenly in front of the sun. The source is the same, the nature is not. He turns, and his body stops working. His knees give out. He falls on his face. The voice says, "Do not be afraid. I am the first and the last and the living one. I died, and behold, I am alive forevermore." There it is, one more time. I am. Not I was, not I became, I am. Quantum physicists describe a property called non-locality, the capacity of certain particles to exist in relationship across space without being bound by the distances between them. They are not constrained by the dimensions that constrain everything else. They exist in a different category of being. Scientists did not discover this until the 20th century. They are still not entirely sure what to do with it. I do not think Jesus was a particle, but I think about non-locality when I read this text, because what Jesus describes, his existence before the world was spoken, his relationship with the Father before time, his descent into history, and his return, is not the resume of a very old man. It is the signature of a being who exists outside the container of time itself, who chose for 33 years to operate inside it, and then stepped back out. This is not a prophet who had visions. This is not a teacher with cosmic metaphors. This is not a religious genius who intuited something transcendent about his own nature. This is a person who was present before the first word of Genesis was spoken, who came here to say so, and who is now speaking to the last man alive who walked with him to make sure the record is complete. John, on the ground, hears the voice say, "Write what you see in a book." And the old fisherman gets up, because that is what you do when the person you love asks you to do something. Even when your hands are shaking, even when you are on a volcanic island with a Roman garrison somewhere over the hill, even when what you have just heard is so far beyond what you expected that the only honest way to start your letter is to say, "I fell at his feet as though dead," you get up and you write.
So, what do we do with all of this? 3 things, and I want to say them slowly. The first is this. Jesus did not claim pre-existence once in a single dramatic moment that could be dismissed as poetry or exaggeration. He said it to a theologian in the dark. He said it to a crowd on a hillside and watched them leave. He said it to hostile religious authorities who understood exactly what he meant and reached for stones. He said it in a private prayer with no audience except God and 11 frightened men the night before he died.
across multiple years, multiple cities, multiple types of listeners. The consistency is the argument. This was not a slip. This was a testimony he repeated until his last night on earth, and then picked up again on a volcanic island 60 years later. The second is personal, and I want you to sit with it for a moment. If Jesus existed before Bethlehem, if the incarnation was not the beginning of his story, but a chapter entered in the middle of one that has no beginning, then his choice to come here was not an impulse. It was not a reaction to a problem that surprised anyone. Before the foundation of the world, the Father loved the Son, and inside that love, before a single human breath had been taken, something was decided. You were not an afterthought. You were the point. He came from somewhere, and he came here on purpose. The third, and I want you to let this one land. The man who got tired and sat by a well. The man who wept at a tomb because the grief of the people he loved was real enough to break his composure. The man who ate fish on a beach after the resurrection, who asked a broken fisherman 3 times if he loved him, who was patient enough to give Thomas the specific wounds he needed to touch before he could believe. That man, tired, weeping, eating, waiting, patient, looked at eternity and called it home, and he left it anyway. He left a glory the Father had to give back because he had set it aside deliberately. He walked into the narrow, dusty, aching confines of 33 human years. He learned what it is to be hungry, to be doubted, to be alone in the night with a prayer that costs everything. He did this not because he had to. He existed before had to existed. He did it because he wanted to be with you more than he wanted to stay in the glory he had before the world was made. That is not a doctrine. That is not a creed. That is a love story with a prequel that starts before the first word of Genesis. And it ends, if you can call it ending, with an old man getting up off the ground on a black island, picking up a pen and writing it so that you and I could read it 2,000 years later and understand. He was always coming. Which statement of Jesus about his life before this one hit you hardest? Tell me in the comments below. I read every one of them. And if no one has told you this today, the God who was before everything chose to come here anyway, for you, specifically, by name. He didn't just come to save you from something. He came from somewhere, and that changes everything.